Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another edition of the Korea Pod. My name is Henry Shin. Please remember to subscribe, rate, and review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you receive podcasts. Once again, it does help to get the word out. We always appreciate the promotion. If you find any value from this podcast and you'd like to spread the word in terms of other people who may also have an interest in Korean issues, definitely will be helping us out that way. All right, so we will be talking about one of these issues that unfortunately keeps popping up from time to time here in Korean society. And it's in regards to celebrities who get caught up in scandals, specifically some kind of gambling scandal. And the latest one involves one of the iconic members of these girl groups that came to prominence in the 1990s. So basically, when I was a student, and these groups were the biggest names in showbiz here in Korea. So when I was growing up, when I was in high school and going into college, the biggest girl groups at that time, the ones that kind of came to the fore and started this whole, I would say, pioneering the idol trend for these girl groups that later on became successful phenomenons like the Wonder Girls, Girls' Generation, and later on, all these popular groups like Twice and AOA and Red Pink and what have you. The early days in the 1990s, there were two groups that dominated that decade for the large part, and that was Finkel and S.E.S. Now, this was one of those situations where you were either Team Finkel or Team S.E.S, and you preferred one group or the other, or you preferred the members of this one group or the other. As a young person, I was more, to be honest, more partial to being a fan of Finkel, and there were a lot of people, of course, who were more favorable or fans of S.E.S. But again, these two groups, I feel, were part of that pioneering wave of these girl idol groups that have dominated the Korean music industry in the subsequent decades. So those two groups, particularly S.E.S, one of the big bands to come out of SM Entertainment, which of course became one of the major three entertainment agencies here in Korea. S.E.S was a trio of women, Pada, Eugene, and Shoo, and they were known for their very bubbly style, good choreography. Pada was a great vocalist, and they seemed to have a really good chemistry together, and they each had their own kind of unique quirks or charms. And so you, again, were partial to one or the other. Pada because of her musical ability, Eugene maybe because of her looks and her other charismatic aspects, and Shoo just being this kind of bubbly, cute person. So that group, of course, eventually ran its course. All three members went on to do their own things. Pada becoming a prominent solo vocalist in her own right, and also a musical theater performer. Eugene also getting a lot of success as an actress, and now settling in as a happy wife and mother of children. And Shoo also, maybe to a lesser degree of success than her other partners, also continuing her work in the entertainment industry. But she recently came into the news because of these rumors that started swirling around in regards to a lawsuit that was filed to the prosecution. And the plaintiffs in that lawsuit were alleging that they had lent money to this so-called idol singer in the amount of 600 million won, respectively 350 million won by one guy and 250 million won lent by the other guy. So that's a big chunk of change. It's over 500,000 US dollars. One guy lending $300,000, the other guy lending $200,000 to this, at that time, unnamed idol singer to cover her gambling losses. The lawsuit was further alleging that there was a promise to repay this debt. She, or the singer, was not able to be contacted, basically went radio silent, basically was ghosted by this singer was ghosting these two guys who were trying to collect on their debts, and so they felt they had no other choice but to file this lawsuit. And so, as you can imagine, once this story made the media, there was a lot of speculation as to who this so-called idol singer was. Well, initially, there was speculation just based on some internet sleuthing by people online with the age of the supposed idol singer in question, that they narrowed it down basically to these two former members of S.E.S. who were of the same age. They're just saying the circumstantial evidence seemed to indicate that it was either Shoo or perhaps it was Eugene. And so that was how these rumors started online. A lot of speculation. Is it Eugene? Why would she be gambling? Is it Shoo? And so people were wondering who the actual singer who was the subject to this lawsuit was. Well, we had representatives of both sides say that it wasn't them. The side representing Eugene was quite defiant, quite angry, saying that these are spurious rumors. Eugene was in the last month of her pregnancy. She was undergoing prenatal care. She didn't even play any of these casino games. She was not interested in that at all. And so they were even saying that if these malicious rumors persist, that she was going to take legal action. And then subsequently, later on, Shoo came out with a public statement of her own saying that I had stayed quiet up till now, but once I saw that my dear friend Eugene was being dragged through the mud and being accused of being the subject of this lawsuit, I had to speak out. And yes, indeed, it is me who is the subject of this lawsuit and investigation by the prosecution, and it is my responsibility. I apologize for any disturbance this is causing to society, regardless of the reasons, and I will be forthright in terms of answering any questions to the prosecutors and trying to repay this debt as quickly as possible. So that was the big revelation, that it was indeed Shoo who was the person that owed this massive amount of money, 600 million won, to these two plaintiffs. And now people started wondering what the heck is going on here. So a lot of questions remained. And again, as you can expect, a lot of speculation continued to bubble over. And there were even other rumors coming out that people who happened to frequent some of these casinos claimed that they saw her, even after these revelations come out, sitting at the casino tables, gambling away tens of millions of dollars. So even after being a subject to this, she couldn't resist the temptation to go ahead and gamble even more money away. So subsequently, her side issued statements clarifying, saying that these are malicious rumors. There were rumors about her with a pending divorce, and she's saying all of that is false or greatly exaggerated, that she is not gambling anymore, that she intends to take a hiatus from her celebrity activities and focus on repaying these debts. But she's emphasizing that these debts that she owes, this 600 million won, wasn't strictly all about gambling payments, and that the amount being borrowed was also for other things like her expenses in life and what have you. So that was the statement she came out with, which again raised more questions as to, again, what's going on here. Well, first of all, I guess there's the logical idea of to take a pause from engaging in any celebrity activities to focus on paying back the debt. I think a lot of people like ourselves who aren't celebrities, you would think, well, don't you need to actually be a celebrity and engage in celebrity activities to make money to pay back the debt? How else would a celebrity make money to pay back those debts? It's not like she's going to wash dishes and see that debt is going to be quickly repaid. And then the other question is this idea that the amount that she borrowed was not all about gambling, and it was with other expenses in mind. It's kind of a weird explanation in the sense that she did acknowledge that she did go to the casinos. What she claims is that she went to the casino with some friends. She was very inexperienced and naive, and she didn't really know much about gambling. But then she got sucked into it and she lost a bunch of money. And then it was this vicious cycle where she kept on trying to chase her losses and she kept losing more money, but she just had to go back and then lose money. It was this vicious cycle. And the implication and the nuance she seemed to be giving was that she was sort of this victim of unscrupulous people who tempted her with gambling, and she got sucked into this huge debt. And eventually she had to borrow money with these two guys, 350 million won here and 250 million won there, and almost painting herself as this victim of a scheme of these, you think about these drug dealers who will give out some freebies and hook the guy in, get them addicted, and then have them keep coming back and becoming lifelong paying customers and get into severe debt where they have to engage in other criminal activities and whatever. It seemed like that was the picture she was trying to paint. And the lawyers representing the plaintiffs, the guys who are a part of this lawsuit, came back very hard, saying that they are very indignant about the implications of what Shoo's side is saying about how somehow this was their fault, or that she was a victim of their kind of manipulative games. And what they're saying is that these casinos, the casino in question is the Paradise Hotel and Casino in Incheon. These places are above board businesses. They are foreign only, and they are places that really will not condone any type of that kind of allegation or suspicion, which in Korean parlance, you would mean that they were some kind of 사채, 업체, or these kind of loan sharks who kind of preying on naive, innocent people and sucking them into this web of debt, spiraling them into this huge, huge issue where they charge obscene amounts of interest. They're saying they are the victims. They lent this money on good faith because she was pleading with them for the money, promising that she would pay them back in a timely manner. She did not do so. She ghosted them. She went AWOL. She wouldn't return the phone calls. And what they're simply trying to do in filing this lawsuit is just simply to get their money back. Now, this is one of those cases where it's easy to think of everybody as being the bad guys. You might look at these two guys and go, what the hell are you doing lending this person? I don't know how well you know this person, but 350 million won, 250 million won, respectively. That's a lot of money. You can buy a lot of things with $300,000. The total amount of over $500,000. You can buy a house. You can buy multiple cars. You can put that away for your children's scholarship fund and your college fund. And you can pretty much be set for a very, very long time with that massive amount of money. And what are you doing cavalierly, just lending that money out to somebody who you were not sure would be good for repaying that money back to you, especially if it was in the context of gambling and being in debt and just knowing the telltale signs of somebody who is in over their head and desperate for money just to chase their gambling losses. So to be fair, there are some questions as to what these guys were thinking, what their motivations were in lending that massive amount of money. Maybe there's some credibility to their end about, Shoo being a celebrity and that she could easily make that money through her fame, and that was a good investment for them if they were charging interest and or that she could pay them back in a timely manner. Maybe they are shady characters and they thought that they could get away with a quick scheme to loan shark some money and get some huge interest payments back. And maybe it backfired on them and they're deciding to go this very public route. But you got to say, it's a very risky move because they are going through a lawsuit filed through the prosecutor's office. So that prosecutor will have the subpoena power to investigate everything in regards to this. So that means them as well. And if anything comes up that signifies some kind of red flag where these two individuals may not be completely above board, then they are also potentially legally liable. So that would be a risk of taking. So you got to take it with a bit of a grain of salt, but you have to also understand that it's probably not an easy decision to file a lawsuit with the prosecution unless you felt completely aggrieved and you really felt you had no other recourse to collect that money unless it was through these official channels with the prosecutors and this now ensuing investigation. Now, Shoo's lawyers have been saying that Shoo is very eager to get this investigation done as quickly as possible. She's willing to speak to whoever wants to speak and ask her questions, and she's willing to go through that whole process wholeheartedly. And her continuous claim is that she is determined to repay back her debt. So we have to acknowledge that she did admit that that is essentially the correct amount, that she does owe that money and that she does need to pay that back. So now that's going to be the question of what the prosecutors are going to find is, was there illegal gambling activity involved? The amount, of course, is subject to raise a lot of eyebrows. What was the nature of these loans, and how did Shoo allegedly violate these agreements? And so that's all going to eventually, hopefully, be find out through this investigation. So the plaintiff side is upset that they're being painted as these kind of shady, nefarious figures. They're saying that they might even sue for additional libel or defamation of character with what Shoo's side is representing as to her being a potential victim in all this. As I said before, nobody really comes out of this ordeal with their hands clean. It's a pretty messy situation, but it also highlights this issue here in Korea that seems to be a recurring pattern, and that is these celebrities who get caught up in these gambling scandals. Now, when I mean celebrities, I mean people from all the different facets of public life, whether they be athletes, entertainers, comedians, actresses, actors. Gambling seems to be one of the vices that continuously crop up, more so than things like drug abuse or other things, because to be quite frank, here in Korea, it is pretty hard to be a habitual drug user and get away with it or have your career be intact, because the drug laws here are so strict that if you're even caught once with even smoking a joint, if you're caught with marijuana here in Korea, it's almost a career killer, and very few people can survive that kind of suspicion or eventual prosecution from that kind of drug use. Some celebrities have never recovered. Others have been able to, after a long period of time, come back from those so-called drug scandals. It's a shame. The rest of the world probably has different opinions on Korea's drug laws, and maybe that they are a bit too draconian, especially with marijuana, because a lot of other countries seem to be moving in the opposite direction with marijuana usage, and now a lot of people are touting some of the health benefits in terms of treatments of certain pain and disease with marijuana usage, and that kind of thinking probably will permeate and come into the consciousness and affect some political change and policy change here in Korea, because we've already seen that happen with now the Korean authorities allowing, in certain cases, the use of medical marijuana, at least the substance THC, to treat certain ailments and diseases. So it is moving, albeit in a very slow pace, in a more open-minded and progressive direction with marijuana usage. But the overall point being that drug use is not really a huge problem here, because it is just so strictly cracked down on. Now, gambling is a different thing. There are strict rules against gambling here in Korea. Technically, Koreans aren't allowed to gamble legally. There are very few outlets that they're able to do so. Some horse racing, some sports gambling, all through government-regulated agencies. And then there's the underground stuff, the underground casinos, and when Koreans go overseas and gamble in casinos abroad, like in Macau or in Singapore or Las Vegas, then they can gamble, and oftentimes they do get in trouble for that as well. The case with the Paradise City Casino and Hotel in Incheon is interesting because that is actually a foreigner-only casino. And so technically, you cannot go in there if you're a Korean citizen. Now, Shoo, she happens to be half Japanese, and she does hold permanent residency in Japan, and so that allows her access and entry into those foreigner-only casinos, and that's how she was able to get in. That's how she was able to play those games, and it was probably how she was eventually sucked into that massive amount of debt. Those foreigner-only casinos, I can tell you from personal experience, they're open 24 hours a day. You get served free drinks, free alcohol. You can get free food in a lot of places. It's bright lights, very posh environment for the most part, and you are just tempted to just gamble the night away. And some of these table limits are quite high, and if you're betting a certain amount, you are liable to lose a lot of money in a very, very short period of time. And that's happened to a lot of people, and Shoo just happened to be one of those people caught up. But again, it's just the latest in a long line of these Korean celebrities who have been caught up in these gambling scandals. I can just name a few off the top of my head. In the sports world, there was a team known as, well, they are still, the Samsung Lions, and they were dominant in the mid to late 2010s, from the mid 2005s. They were dominating the KBO, the Korean Baseball Organization. They were winning multiple Korea Series championships. They had the best pitching staff. It seemed like nobody would really interrupt that run of dominance, to the dismay of the rest of the league, because there wasn't a lot of parity because Samsung was just so dominant. Now, their last truly dominant season, there was a bit of a scandal that occurred. This was in the lead up to the Korea Series when they were going to face the Tucson Bears. And there was this report that came out that a bunch of the players that were part of the Samsung Lions had actually been gambling. And they were gambling heavily in various casinos, like in Macau. And they named and shamed some of these players. They included players like Oh Seung-hwan, who is currently in the major leagues right now, pitching for the Colorado Rockies. He's played for the St. Louis Cardinals and the Toronto Blue Jays. So he's in the U.S., so he hasn't really faced any punishment here in Korea. Other guys, prominent members of the Samsung Lions include Im Chang-young, who was the closer after Oh Seung-hwan left for the U.S. He was subsequently released from the team. He eventually came back and signed with the Kia Tigers. Another prominent player was An Ji-man. Now, he was not as lucky. He was part of this crackdown on Samsung Lions who gambled, but he was also later found to have been running, or at least helping a friend invest in and set up an illegal gambling site of his own. And that's obviously a big no-no, especially for sports players, especially with the potential for corruption and having these athletes get tempted, whether through bookies or through other shady gambling propositions to throw their own matches if sports gambling is involved, and just generally the unethical nature of having an athlete be completely caught up in the gambling world, that it just leads to a lot of very negative consequences, as many people who follow sports will tell you. So he actually had his career ended because of that scandal, An Ji-man. And we've seen countless athletes in the past and countless sports as a league itself also fall to these gambling scandals, including in the K-League. There was a huge match-fixing scandal where gamblers were able to infiltrate and influence certain players to throw matches, or at least help with certain spot betting instances where they can gain an edge by having the players do something on the field to help themselves out. In the KBL, in the basketball league, there was also a huge gambling scandal that caught up with people like the legendary point guard and hero and subsequent coach of Dongbu Promi, and how he was also having his career completely destroyed because of these allegations with sordid match fixing. Again, an indirect result of how gambling can infiltrate a sport. With celebrities themselves, countless celebrities have been caught up in either gambling too excessively overseas, or some celebrities being caught in these underground casinos here in Korea. We've had the case of a very prominent comedian slash singer, a guy who was ubiquitous on all the variety shows, known for his quick wit, his charm, his goofiness. Shin Jung-hwan, very popular guy, multiple times caught up in these gambling controversies and scandals. He had to take a break from broadcasting, came back again, tried to make a comeback as an entertainer, again caught up in these gambling scandals, and really having his career completely derailed by all of these sordid issues, dealing with this too strong, irresistible temptation of being sucked up in the gambling world here. Now, you might think this is a bit of hyperbole, that all celebrities gamble and that Korea has celebrities. They have extra disposable income. If they want to relieve some stress by gambling a bit, maybe they lose a bit of money. What's the big deal? Why are we being so puritanical about all this? And I think there is a point to that there are certainly different moral standards or ethical qualms about certain things like marijuana usage or gambling that aren't necessarily as extremely or sensitively felt in other countries around the world. We know a lot about how these athletes and entertainers in the U.S., they're known to be in the Las Vegas casinos, splashing chips around, gambling. Poker is a big phenomenon where it's a form of gambling, but a lot of people say it's also has a huge element of skill, and a lot of celebrities are involved in that as well. And so, yes, there are some negative connotations in the West to celebrities who gamble, but for the most part, it's not necessarily as scandalous unless it gets into hurting the integrity of something like sports, like the accusation of throwing a basketball game because you were reached by a bookie who promised you a lot of money to do something with shaving points or what have you. So here in Korea, maybe it is more sensitively felt, but it is also this idea that the government may be being a bit too maternal, maybe too much of a nanny state, with this idea that you have to save the people from themselves. And there is, despite the fact that much of the gambling is illegal here in Korea, you still have gambling issues. There is one legal Korean casino. It's called the Gangwon-land Casino in, of course, Gangwon-do. A lot of countless heartbreaking stories of people who've just completely destroyed their lives because of this addiction to gambling. I think everybody listening probably has or knows somebody or knows an acquaintance that has been caught up in gambling, and some of the destructive elements it causes to your loved ones, your friends, your family members, and how it is such a painful and almost impossible abyss to dig yourself out of. And so there's got to be some sympathy toward, there's got to be some, of course, sadness in seeing people like this who succumb to the addiction of gambling, and you got to treat it like you do with alcoholism. If you accept that alcoholism is a disease, that it needs to be treated. If you accept things like schizophrenia, other mental diseases to be things that should not be ostracized, but should be treated with compassion and hopefully try to get that person to a better place, I think you have to have that same approach with gambling as well, because it can be very destructive. It can ruin a lot of people's lives, not just the gambler's life, but a lot of people around them, especially because we're talking about financial ruin and the potential to ruin the financial well-being of the people around you. There are a lot of things that need to be addressed here. I briefly alluded to it before with that whole cryptocurrency scandal involving the Shinil Group and their claims of finding 150 trillion won in gold coins. There is that thirst, that hunger to get rich quick. And if people feel there's a way to improve their lot in life by suddenly making a lot of money, whether it's investing in some weird speculative cryptocurrency scam, or putting all your money into some investment tip by speculating in a property, or going to a casino and gambling your life savings, thinking that if you double down on the roulette wheel or play baccarat, you can come home with twice as much money, and then you double up again, and then you can become a rich person. These are fantasies. There are mathematical fallacies to all of this, but it's something that's really difficult to rationalize, especially if you are in desperate states, or if you're just in this mindset that you've got to make that money, you've got to make that money quickly, or if you've lost that money, you've got to make that money back, and you're desperate to get back to even. And that's when you dig yourself deeper and deeper and deeper into that hole. And so, yes, you can condemn people like these celebrities, like the Samsung Lions players, like Shin Jung-hwan. Maybe you can condemn Shoo for being so irresponsible. You can condemn these guys for lending her that ridiculous amount of money. Like, what were you thinking lending her that much amount of money? What were your intentions? But you also have to kind of see it from the side of, why did this happen? How did this happen? How did somebody who was such a beloved figure, part of one of the most iconic girl groups of all time here in Korea, how did she get to a place where she was in such dire straits that she was borrowing money from these random strangers to feed this gambling addiction? And what can be done to help people like that? Of course, you are responsible for your actions, and if you have those debts, you have to repay them. And if there are some legal liabilities, you have to meet the full force of the law and be brought to justice. But at the same time, you do need help, you do need treatment, and you do need to get better. Because again, this is a disease like cancer, like alcoholism, like psychopathy, like any other thing that needs to be treated. I feel gambling also is something that does need to be treated. And there are a lot more people that could stand to benefit from getting that treatment. And we hope that the cases of people like Shoo are just cautionary tales that we hopefully will see less and less of in the future. All right, that's going to do it for another edition of the Korea Pod. I apologize for my voice. I've been under the weather, so hopefully that'll clear up by the next podcast. But thanks for bearing with me here today. We'll be back with another edition very shortly. Until then, my name is Henry Shin. Goodbye.